What's up, everyone? I have a very interesting game prepared for today. Near the end of high school, I had broken the 2400 mark. I had started feeling a really top dog, and I started playing super aggressive, super reckless chess. So the game we're going to look at today is a really interesting one. It's a really fun one. This was when I was 24-24 USCF, and I was only 17 years old, so I was feeling pretty good about myself. And the game we're going to see is a game I played in the last round of the forwarded games tonight. There's this classic tournament that the Marshall Chess Club has. It's still going on. I think it's been going on for like 30 years or something. Pretty much you show up there at 7 p.m., you play a lot of games, and before you know it, it's midnight. You've played 4 games, you've played 4 really good rapid games, and it literally has been a weekly tradition for the past 30 years or something. If even now, if you go in on a Thursday night, you will be able to play a tournament. So this was the last round game. It was a big money game, and it was played against Grandmaster Michael Rode. Michael Rode now, his FIDE has dropped quite a bit. I think he's even under 2300. But back in the day, he was a very strong GM. Back in the day, he was one of the toughest. I believe at one point he got above the 2600 mark. He was definitely in the top 100 in the world at one point. So this is a very strong player we're talking about. I was white, and he was black. Let's see the game. So going into this game, I was a really big d4 player, and now when you guys see my videos, you might see that I'm playing f4 and e4 all the time. But back in the day, I was a big d4 player. So I played d4, my opponent played knight f6, I played c4, he played d6, this is the old Indian defense here. I played knight f3, g6, knight c3, the classic putting the knights on the golden squares, bishop f5. This is supposed to be a very dubious setup here, and the reason why is that this bishop just is not that well placed. Queen b3 can hit the b7 pawn and put his queenside under uncomfortable pressure at some point. And yeah, knowing what I know now, I really don't understand why I didn't just do that immediately. Like, back in the day, if I was able to speak to high school Raven right now in one of those like time montages, and I speak back through time, I would just tell him, what are you doing? Just put your queen on b3. I tell all my students this. In queen pawn positions, when the queen's bishop move, the first move you should always look at is attacking the b pawn with the queen. So instead, though, this was back in the day when I was really focused on kingside fianchettos, and for that purpose I just played g3. My opponent played bishop g7, I played bishop g2, c6. Now queen b3 isn't nearly as strong because they can always just respond with queen b6, and we would just have a cowboy standoff there of queen on queen. If I take, I open his rook. If he takes, he opens my rook. Neither side really wants to do anything here. White would continue to be slightly better, but white isn't nearly as advantageous as if white had just gone for the queen b3 stuff earlier on. So I played d5. d5 is a very creative move. I want to put my knight on d4. I want to open up this bishop and lay siege to that diagonal. One of the problems, though, here is that this is just a bit of a waste of time, though. It is a logical move, but at the same time, it's not using my time most effectively. I should have castled and done something like rook e1 and e4. I could have also played the queen b3 stuff, as we mentioned before, but yeah, looking back, you know, every single year you get better at chess, every single year you study, you just start to look at your old games and notice really basic mistakes that you made. I would never make a move like this now. d5. This is obviously a mistake because just white isn't really ahead in development, and with this move, while I am clearing out d4 for the knight, which could be good for me, I'm also really weakening my dark squares on this diagonal. So all in all, it's really hit or miss, and that's a sign that I shouldn't be wasting a tempo on it. My opponent played knight e4, a very, very strong move. Immediately his bishop is open. He's trading off the knights, and notice that both of these knights obstructed his bishop to some extent. So this is a really perfect move. I played knight d4. I accepted the fact that he was going to double my pawns, and my goal here is that, you know, hopefully I'll be able to put my rook on b1 at some point. Maybe not immediately, because that bishop is scoping us out, but it does look like the bishop is getting kicked immediately. Bishop goes back to d7, I play queen b3. My opponent plays queen c8. He does not want the queen trade. I think queen b6 would have also been completely fine here. I could play bishop d2, I have some nice tension. My pawns are pretty ugly here, but at the same time, if he ever takes, he fixes my pawns completely. And the one nice thing about this whole setup here is that I do have a lot of pressure on c6. The problem with these pawns here is that he has a very nice weak square in front of them for his knight to come to, but as long as his knight is busy defending this pawn here, which it is at the moment, he's not going to be able to use it. Like, if he plays knight a6 now, oh, that's surprising. I would have expected that I could just take and take. I could take, 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 take. Apparently this is just equal, which is crazy. But yeah, the idea is my pawns are so weak on the queen side that even if I snatch a pawn here... Okay, yeah, this is actually just bad. I think maybe I should just take with the knight. Yeah, if I take with the knight, it's around equal. Really crazy stuff. Yeah, looking back at myself, I was just so focused on playing like aggressive, super active chess, and I just didn't... I remember in the game when this was played, I just let him give me these pawns and I didn't even think twice about it. I thought, oh, I'll get an open file? No big deal. Now when looking back at this game, as a Grandmaster, I really am hesitant to ever get pawns as ugly as these. So a4... I really don't know what this move was about. I've looked at this game before recording this video. I know at some point I had some idea behind a4. I guess the idea is that if c5, knight b5 takes, I can take this way. This a4 must be a really weak move, though. Yeah, at the moment the position is fine, objectively, but after a4, it's starting to dip into black's favor. This is just a very dubious move. I think also maybe I just didn't want him to play b6 to ever build concrete on the b file. And I wanted to make sure that if I play rook b1 and he plays b6, okay, that's it. Yeah, I wanted if I played rook b1 and he plays b6, I want to be able to chip away, chip with a5 and break through the concrete. So my opponent plays knight a6. Knight a6 is a fantastic move. First of all, the knight is coming to this great square. The other thing is it just nullifies my entire idea, right? If I play rook b1 and I'm attacking b7, but his knight is defending it, then he never has to push b6, and me being able to push a4, a5 hasn't made a single difference. So I play bishop a3. I'm going gung-ho. I'm all in. This is just such a funny game. Like back in the day, I just played such aggressive chess. My opponent wants to play knight c5, and I'm just resistant at all costs to letting him get it, even at the cost of my bishop. Like, this is a bishop at the end of the day. The board is relatively open. I should be very hesitant to just trade off a bishop for a knight here, but I'm all in, as stated before. Castles, rook b1, my opponent takes on d5. And here, yeah, I think, okay, honestly, I did make the right decision here. If I take with this pawn, I've fixed my doubled pawns, but I have not fixed all of these weaknesses. There are weak squares here and here. Notice that I do not have a b pawn, and my d pawn is way too far advanced. Hence, all of these squares on the c file are going to be very weak. He's just going to play something like knight c5. Knight c5 would bring him a big advantage, but even better is what the computer points out. He can just snatch on a4. If I take back, I'm going to lose this pawn and then lose the knight, and I'll just be down 2 pawns with a really tough position. So I took with the bishop, and as ugly as my structure is, I do have some really nice pressure here. It's actually quite surprising to me that this is that much worse. I thought that this was more or less... I thought I was doing fine here back in the day, and even looking at it now, it doesn't look that bad. Like, as ugly as your pawns are, my pieces are very active. My pieces are extremely active. My bishop is shooting through here, shooting through here. It's very likely to predict that I'm going to be able to win this b7 pawn at some point. Meanwhile, you know, if the knight comes here, my plan is just to chop it. And that's what he did. Knight c5, I chop, he takes back. I took on b7. I'm going gung-ho after all. If I castle here, he's just going to snatch a pawn on d4. Okay, maybe he could play rook b8 first, as the computer's pointing out. But even takes, this is going to be a bit uncomfortable for me. No, I guess actually the computer is pointing out it's fine. I mean, one of the things here is that as ugly as this pawn looks, it's an isolated pawn, it's ugly, it's a bit vulnerable on this open file, on this half-open file for black. But at the same time, my bishop is made to be a monster, and the idea is that if their bishop moves out, I can always snatch on e7, and all of a sudden my bishop is just dominating the whole board. And once this e-pawn gets out of the way, once this e-pawn comes off the board, he can never push my bishop out with e7 to e6. And that's a really serious thing. Instead, though, I take. Instead I take. My opponent plays bishop h3. Fantastic move. He knows he has to keep my king in the center. He does not want to take here, because if he takes, I take back. I'm going to snatch this bishop, and everything's going to be good. During the game, I was worried about bishop takes a4, but if I take on e7, this can't be bad. This can't be bad at all. Takes. I could, of course, snatch an exchange, but probably it's safer just to castle first. My bishop is just dominating the whole board here. I've survived. It turns out that material has just been traded. A lot of pawns have come off the board, and at the same time, luckily for me, one of my ugly doubled pawns got traded in the chaos. So from that, this should be completely winning here. I don't know why the computer went off, but yeah, this is plus 2.7. Very, very good position here. Instead, he plays bishop h3. Very nice, very complicated move here. I was just such an unbelievably reckless, mischievous child. This is so funny. Like, literally, there's so many things I could play here. Rook b5 makes so much sense just to push the queen around. Rook b5, queen a3, and, you know, this looks a little scary, but I play king d2, my rook will come out. If he plays a check, I can always block with the rook, or I can even block with the knight. Yeah, wow, look at that. The computer points out if I block with the knight, rook a1 is probably going to trap the queen. Like knight c2, and the best move is e6, and the queen can say goodbye to her army. It's time to go.
It's time to go!
So instead of rook b5, which would have been very logical, I'm all about the money. I'm all about the candies. I just took on e7. I'm attacking the rook. I'm now attacking this. This is positionally good, to be clear. To get rid of this e-pawn, as long as the e-pawn stays on the board, I'm getting flustered. My words are smushing into each other because I'm getting too excited by what's about to happen. You guys are going to understand once you see the finale. But if this pawn is ever able to get to e6, that really determines the health of this bishop on d5. As soon as this pawn disappears, this bishop goes from being like very hit or miss, maybe a great piece, maybe a bad piece, to being a fantastic piece, unequivocally. So I take on e7. I don't play rook b5. I take on e7. My opponent takes on d4. And as y'all can see, the bar is really starting to dip. Things are going pretty badly. Now, if he takes on d4, I would just be able to snatch. Okay, if I snatch on a8, he's going to have some checks. And because this bishop is poking my king out here, I would have to run into the fire, which is not what we want. Instead, I would just play queen e3. I'm bullying him into a queen trade. And in this position, what are the pawns like? I'm up a pawn here. I do have doubled pawns, but the thing is that I'm going to play e4 and just solidify this monster bishop here on this score. I'm going to play rook b7. This bishop is probably going to move at some point, and my rook is going to get to f1. This is already a close to winning position here. Notice that while the extra pawn is quite ugly, it combined with the fact that it's just such a dominant position and it's going to work so well with my rooks, is really going to overwhelm the black position. Instead, though, my opponent played the best move here. He is a grandmaster after all. He played check on a5, and now, if only my king could run this way. If my king could run this way, you know, I'd have a fantastic pawn structure now. He's completely fixed my pawns. My doubled pawns have gone from being the ugly duckling on c3 and c4 to being the beautiful swan on d4 and c4. And yeah, if I could just run here, right? Like if I could just play king f1, he takes that pawn on a4, and then I run with king to g2 or g1, this would be fantastic. I could already win. I would be up a pawn. I would be up a pawn with a tremendously advantageous pawn structure. He has these really weak pawns on d6 and a7. Instead, though, I have to play king d1. He takes on a4, and I play king d2. And I really like this game for a lot of reasons. First of all, just in general, this shows the priority list you want to have. Positionally here, I should be winning. I have a better bishop, really healthy pawns. I am also up a pawn. All those factors mean that I should be winning positionally. Or you could also say strategically, more or less, in the long term, assuming I survive. The problem, though, is my king is in the center, if you haven't noticed. Am I going to survive? It's really unclear. Here the computer points out that he can play rook a e8, and it's really important that his queen is defending the rook here. In other positions, when he goes for rook a e8, I'm going to have bishop takes f7 check to distract his rook and snatch the mango on e8. Instead, though, he missed this. At this point, you know, this was a game 30, this was a rapid game. We were both getting low on time here. I was also trying to make my moves very quickly, so from what I remember, he had like only a few minutes left, and I had several minutes. I think I had 10 or 15 minutes. He goes for the check. Now I had a choice here. I realized that after king c3, he should probably just start checking, because he cannot take this pawn, the queen is here. Now also, his queen is not defending the rook, so rook e8 never works. I can always snatch on f7, the rook takes, and I'll snatch the mango on e8. Instead, he should just keep checking, and it's going to be a draw. I thought about this position, and I really wanted to get the win. You know, my opponent's low on time. I am playing a GM, but his rating isn't that different than mine at this point. And, you know, if I could just survive somehow, maybe this would work. My bishop is great after all. Here I thought about it, I played this move, king e3. King e3, really, really insane move. I'm walking right into the fire here. Again, the rook e8 does not work. Rook e8 cannot work because the bishop takes f7 check. So for the moment, my king is still safe. But look at this. Guys, have you ever seen something like this? Just, you're already being checked a lot and you move your king straight into the board. But I had nowhere else to go. If I ran here or here, he's just going to start checking me this way. If I go back, he's going to start checking me. And of course I can't go to one of these squares because my rook hangs. So I ran fully into the fire. And here's where things start to get crazy. He throws another check. And I should have gone back. I wanted to go back. But something in me just wanted the win too much. And I played king f4. He doesn't have a check with the queen. Technically, this should be losing here because the problem is now after rook e8, I cannot take on f7. He's going to take with a check. If takes here, I don't have time to take the rook. I'm just losing. My queen is about to get slaughtered. So my opponent plays rook e8. I play queen f6. At this point, I'm completely lost, but he does need to find one more correct move. If he takes on e2, I can keep running with rook king g5, or bishop takes f7, actually. Yeah, sorry, bishop takes f7 is the much better approach. My opponent didn't want to do this because bishop takes f7, rook takes, and all of a sudden my queen and rook form a perfect duo. Rook f8 takes, that's the end of the game, sir. You can pack up your stuff.
It's time to go!
Instead, though, he had this great move. He had rook e6. He's kicking me out, and if I take, he just takes this way, and I'm pinned. I'm bamboozled. I would have to give up a rook here to save my queen, and this is just going to be... This is a completely hopeless position. Instead, though, my opponent makes a move which made a lot of sense, but in fact it was a big blunder. He played bishop e6. Very logical move. He's just trading off my bishop. This is my prized pearl, right? He's trading off my bishop. After the bishop gets traded, he's going to continue the attack on my king, and, you know, most people here would just play e3, king f3, and king g2 and try to salvage a draw. Can y'all see it? I bet y'all noticed that the bar went all the way up to completely winning. What's the move here? What's the plan? So, in this position, I'd already seen this idea before, and I was really hoping he would allow me to conduct this in a beautiful way. My queen is actually already poised for a nice checkmate. I just need some other piece to be able to help cover this square. But what piece would I choose? I'm going to go king g5. That's what I played. My king is going to h6. All of a sudden, the king goes from being this really weak, helpless animal that's just trying to get away from its predator to being the predator itself. The hunted becomes the hunter. That's the expression. The hunted becomes the hunter. And in this position, my opponent just had no idea what to do. He only had like 30 seconds at this point. If he takes, I'm just going to play king h6, and mate is unstoppable. Notice how safe my king is, by the way. He has no way to hit it on this diagonal, and even if he could, I could just play f4. This brings me to a concept that I wanted to discuss, which is called insulation. I discussed this in my Chessable course. If you want to figure out how safe your king is, just look at how many angles are actually attackable against it. If there are not that many angles attackable against it, it's a pretty safe piece. So after king g5, he just lost on time. He was completely bamboozled. He was completely flustered here. The threat of king h6 was too much. To my opponent's credit, though, the computer declares that it's mate in 4 here. There was literally no way for him to save himself at this position. So, yeah, that was the end of the game. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this. I thought that this was so cool, the fact that my king goes from being hunted to being the hunter within just a few moves. And, yeah, this is just such a crazy position. This definitely is sort of like, there's this really famous Nigel Short king lock, in which he does a similar thing against his opponent. But I feel that's a bit different because in that one, Nigel Short moves his king completely of its own volition. It wasn't that his king was being hunted and became the hunter all of a sudden. So crazy game, and yeah, with this game, I got my rating up to 2431, which was incredible and helped me qualify for the US Juniors in 2011, which was very cool. Hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.